Premier Path Wealth Partners is registered as an investment advisor with the United States Securities and Exchange Commission. SEC registration does not constitute an endorsement of the firm by the Commission, nor does it indicate that the firm has attained a particular level of skill or ability. The material discussed in this episode is provided for informational purposes only and should not be taken as tax, legal, or investment advice. Any market information is from sources deemed reliable and may be the opinions of investment professionals, but you should consult your financial advisor for further assistance. Past performance of investment, sector, or index is not indicative of future results. Please refer to Premier Path's disclosure documents for further information concerning specific products or services.
What advice do you have for a business owner staring down a potential transaction and navigating, again, the culmination of their life's work and all the emotions that go into it? If you have a couple of bullets that you share with business owners facing the opportunity, but also the intricacy of the transaction.
We'll take a deep breath. And they're going to try to speed up the process, and they're going to try to get you all excited, and the emotional part, it's an emotional roller coaster, and it's really important to slow it down. You're in charge, you run the business, you own the business, and they can tell you what their timeline and their process is, but you're in charge. You have the asset that they want. So there is some cadence to, obviously, especially when you go into a process with multiple people bidding on it. That's a different story.
As you know, Premier Path, we work with closely held business owners, multi-generational family wealth, business owners who are, multi-generational in nature, and, have had a great relationship with Legacy Capitals, particularly bringing Richard and the team in with client conversations. How do you pass not only wealth, but the values to create a legacy across multiple generations? And we've included the team on conversations with clients one-off, larger group conversations. So it's been a really nice relationship. But I think what excites me most about today is you bring a really interesting perspective. You have a corporate career, then you have a career in your own family business that's third generation. You led them through some remarkable milestones, having helped sell the business, and now stepping into another career, being on the outside and helping families, multi-generational wealth, and also business owners on their own strategy, on their own legacy planning, on their own business plan. So it's really exciting. I know I shared some of your background, but I always like to hear it directly from the source. But Christin, if you could share a little bit about your background, your bio, and really excited to chat.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Derek. I'm really excited to share. I always start out and talk about a little bit. Our family business actually started with my father and my grandfather going into business together when my grandfather retired from his family business. So we have a family business of a family business. And, there were a lot of reasons for that, but they went into business together when my dad graduated college. And so I always say I'm third generation, but really 2.5, because my dad and my grandfather started the business together. But they started an automotive aftermarket parts remanufacturing business, recycling automotive parts in Philadelphia. And they started that in 1971. Built the business over time. And I grew up and my brothers grew up. There were three of us working in the business in middle school, high school, kind of, and I think I shared this before. It's when you grow up in a family business, sometimes that family business has, a chair at the dining table because you're constantly talking about what's going on in the business. So that's how I grew up. And then when I was about to graduate from college, I said, wow, I really need to get some other experience outside the family business. Some of that had to do with me being, a female and looking around in a manufacturing company and where are the women in leadership? So for me, I called up my cousin who her dad was in my grandfather's original family business, and she was working in corporate. And I said, can I intern with you? So anyway, long story short, I ended up in a career in marketing and technology outside in a public company, and had a great experience kind of learning and growing my career kind of parallel to our family business. I did all at times feel like how do I stay connected to my family? How do I help my family? Sometimes I went through some emotions of feeling like I was abandoning them while they're, working in the business. And so eventually I was able to join our board. And I can talk a little bit about, family businesses. The way, you start out with the friends and family board, and then you kind of migrate as your business grows into advisory boards. And our business ended up being over 1 billion in revenue and over 5,000 employees. And so we had to kind of migrate our board to match the size of the company. Eventually brought on independent board directors, and I continued my career and had 3 young kids, and then planned, to go back to I took a little career break when my kids were little, and then I ended up joining the board and spending some time on the board. And when my father was ready to retire, the board asked me to come and work inside the operating business with my brother. So that's stop there and let ask
Yeah.
me, the story. So,
How did you know? How did the board know? How did your father know that the timing was right to bring you in?
yeah, I mean, we had talked about it all along. My father was always eager to have me come back and work in the business. Oh, you're getting so much great experience. You should come and, work for us and bring it into the business. And we would have these kind of momentary career conversations. Okay, Dad, like, tell me what that would look like. Give me, define the role. How would I function in the family business? And I think the one thing I really learned working in the more corporate environment, for me, it was very important to have a clear picture of, what my role would be, who I'd be reporting to, how I could, what was success going to look like. And, we would go back and forth. And then I just realized, until it was very clear that my skill set matched with what the business needed. And I think that was really the key turning point was when we had 2 independent board directors who really, sat me down and said, "Hey, we really think that you could bring value to the business, and, your dad's retiring, your brother needs some help. Now's a great time for you to come and work in the business." And we were also, at the time, we brought in our first non-family CEO when my father decided to retire. And that process kind of, was the stepping stone to changing and bringing in a second non-family CEO who was on the board with me, and he and I ended up working in the business together. Yeah.
That's great. Did you feel pressure?
I didn't feel pressure. I felt like really honored at that point because I had, such a good career, a lot of good training, and a lot of good management and leadership in, my career outside the business. I felt like it was the right time for me to join the business. And I also was starting to feel like I needed to help and kind of prompting to just support. My brother had been working in the business since he graduated college. He was getting burnt out and kind of struggling with, kind of being the only family member left in the business.
Right.
And so I was really eager to kind of bring some energy and support to number one, kind of reviving the culture, our family culture, and inside the business, and kind of bringing some more of injecting more of the familyness part of the business. We, had so many employees, families of families of families. It wasn't just a family business. We had many, other families with family members working in
Yeah.
the business. So
A tie to the community, right?
Yeah.
It's beyond just the day-to-day operations, but deep connection with the community there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it was important to kind of revive that connection with people. And, I spent time with those board members kind of defining, hey, what would a rotation track look like for me to come into the business and kind of learn. And we mapped out that process on how I could, gain kind of more of a general manager kind of role. Coming into the business. So, um, and I had them as mentors along the way, which was really helpful for me coming into the business.
that's great. And you're one of three. Oh, your oldest brother started in the company out of school. You had something in between where you spent time in building a corporate career and then stepping back, and your other brother is not in the family business or was not in the family business. This is not uncommon. What's the right path, or maybe some pros and cons of what you would advise other families going through similar situations?
It's really hard to define. I think we all know that everybody has different gifts and strengths and desires and passions. And I think it's really important for the rising generation to really discover what those things are. And we all know like that takes decades, right? We probably land on that in our, I don't know, 30s and 40s
Yeah,
even. And
a lifetime of learning.
yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
lifetime learning. And the nice thing about, where we are now in culture, like it's very common for people to change careers and change companies. And so I think when I was growing up, it was like a little bit more linear, like, hey, you're going to either choose the family business or you're going to choose a corporate career.
Mm.
So I did feel like when I made my choice, I wasn't sure how it would ever kind of dovetail back into the family business. And I'm really thankful that I was able to navigate that with the help of, mentors and coaches and outside advisors. And I think that's really important for rising generation owners to really spend time figuring out, outside the business what they uh where their skill sets lie. And also I think one thing really important for me was the external validation in my career that, like, I had really great training programs. I was in a women's leadership program. I was in a technology leadership program. Just getting that outside validation, like rising star in any environment. And
Yeah.
if you go into your family business, you're going to do really well there too. So for me,
You were gonna be successful regardless. It just so happened you would be successful with the family business, not because of the family business.
yeah, and I do
Yeah.
recommend now to our legacy capital clients. I think it's really important for young, early career rising gens to at least take a couple years to work outside the business. And that doesn't have to be an adjacent industry or whatever, although that would be nice. If someone is planning to go into their family insurance company, it would be awesome if they could go and get some experience in an external insurance company. If that's, not a possibility, just getting experience, having, a manager who's not a family member or not working for your family and getting honest feedback about, your work style and your leadership style and really trying to develop some of the skill sets that you can bring back to your family business is really important. And it's also just important for your identity. We spend a lot of time talking about personal flourishing in legacy capitals and how we work with groups of rising gens. We say, flourishing is really about developing yourself and your individuality inside, the family system. And it's important to really just, know who you are and know your own values and how you align and how you can connect and how you can support. But it's really important to kind of figure out, who you are and your own path. And when it is able to kind of dovetail and come, you know, join up with the family, not only the family business. I mean, there's multiple ways you can still support your family. And I think that's something that I learned, help your family have family meetings that, you talk about the business. Maybe you talk about, philanthropy or things you're doing together outside. Maybe you're going to organize, family vacations or ways that your family can stay connected outside of just business conversation. That's what we help families do, just figure out, like, where can everybody plug in and use their skills to support the family?
Yeah, can you talk about that? Because this isn't new to anyone who has a family business. They definitely have a seat at the table. And whether it's the dinner table or vacations, it makes up a good part of the conversation. One of your brothers was not involved in the business. How did he view that, and how did he stay involved, although not directly with how did he stay connected to the family and talk to the person to the right of him at the dinner table, even though he wasn't as directly involved?
Yeah. Well, he actually was working with my mom a lot on our family foundation at the time. We took 10% of the profits of our company and put it into a family foundation. My grandparents and my parents are very generous people, and kind of, they talk about social enterprise and social impact now these days, and I think they were some of the early adopters or early creators of a social enterprise, because their passion was really to provide jobs for people in the inner city.
Yeah.
So my younger brother was connected in and worked on, how do we support the organizations that are in and around our factory workforce. So our foundation's goal was really to support churches and nonprofits and ministries that were connected to, Philadelphia itself. And when we expanded to other places, Mexico, Texas, we also found ways to support organizations that were supporting the workforce, the families around our locations. He would plug in the foundation and kind of help us vet organizations, and while he was kind of doing his own thing as well. But he never really, had the desire to involve himself in the business itself.
That's great. Yeah, it's interesting. Every family member has a role, even if it's not inside of the business, but can create a little bit of distance. So I think the thoughtfulness in which you approach that is, I think, helpful for anyone. And then, well, the business, I don't want to spoil the surprise, but ended up selling, and you were an integral part of that. And I mean, that can be, yeah, for particularly in that middle market, lower middle market. Well, we work in that lower middle market space, but it's probably the single largest decision a business owner has to make. And there's this culmination of emotions, stress, large implications. Nobody wants to fumble on the goal line. Can you walk us through that process?
Yeah. Actually, one of the reasons I decided to come into the family business. I was trying to help my family talk through and think through the strategy for the next 5, 10 years. Like, what are we doing with the business? Let's evaluate, the industry, the headwinds that were coming our way, and the challenges we were experiencing. And we were getting to the size that we needed to continually be putting in these huge investments in technology, in, new facilities and new locations. And we had made a pretty big acquisition, and we were implementing an ERP system. So it just got to the point where where I was feeling like, okay, if we want to grow and continue in the future, we're going to need a sizable investment into all of these different growth factors of the company. So when I was joining the business, I was like, okay, I'm going to convince my family, like, we either need a minority investor, we need to go public, or at the last option is to sell if we don't have, any of these other options don't seem feasible. And so, we spent the next couple years, myself and our CEO, just kind of working through that and trying to, you know, implement this large technology project and really transform our business from a technology perspective. We were wrestling with, all along the way, and I'm sure many of your business owners have people, pick up the phone and call them and be like, "Hey, you wanna sell the business?" Or
all the time,
PEs are calling. They have their dry powder, and they're trying to find, someone from the family to pick up the phone, right?
every week, incoming traffic for sure, yeah.
Yes, incoming traffic. So that's, the challenge, and I think we got to the point where we're like, we really need to do something if we wanna this business to exist beyond us and to grow, and so, we ended up, getting a really great offer from a very large PE firm, and, we kind of, had to kind of take a step back and say, "Okay, this is actually, what we not what we've been waiting for, but we really just couldn't walk away from it." So we ended up going into a PE, evaluation process, and myself and the CFO and the CEO, we, did all of I call it the PE dog and pony show.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and I can smile at it now, but it was exhausting and definitely a learning experience for me. But ultimately, we ended up choosing that first PE that we talked to, and felt like that was the right decision at the time. And as a family, we spent, I would say the process actually took about 8 months, which, when we were really in the process, some processes take shorter amount of time, some are longer, and it was, an exhausting 8 months, I'll say. But
You have to run the business in the meantime too.
yes, and that's really the hard part because most family businesses don't have, a deal team
Right.
working, and we did have to hire some people to help us, through the process. So it's like a separate parallel process. They're, asking for information, and it's long hours, weekends, and I would say, I think we as a family met more frequently, and our board met more frequently, and we just kept saying, "Okay, are we sure this is what we wanna do? Are we," and we as a family kind of, we all kept reassuring each other, "Yeah, this is what we wanna do. This is the right thing for the business." I would say, we always put the business first. Like, we want the business to grow. We want the business to exist, whether, we're able to put the investment in or not. And so we kind of like put our hands in the middle of the team as a team and said, "Okay, let's do it." But yeah, so we sold the business in May of 2019 and then rolled into COVID, which was,
Yeah.
a challenge, I'm sure, for all of your business owners.
Yeah, I was doing the math, I'm like, "Yeah, there's something going on May 2019, right?"
Yeah. Yeah, and I think
Wow.
that was a blessing for us. That would have been a real challenge with 5,000 employees and a big operation in Mexico and Philadelphia and, other locations that we'd acquired. And it was the right thing to do for our family. I think, I've spent a lot of time with lower middle market PEs just through our consulting process now and some different projects I've worked on. And I think the process could be really different. And when business owners are looking for, a partner in that space, I think that whole part of that whole, I'll say, vertical of private equities they have a different model and a different mindset. We had to go with a big PE because we were so big, and, they came in, they took our whole executive team out, they brought in a ton of consultants, and that was really challenging for our family employees, and I was definitely surprised that they did it that way. But I look back on that, and that's pretty common with large PE firms. They have deal teams, and they have operating teams, and they just have a playbook that they use. So I'll say, emotionally, it was like grieving a child for, like, about 6 months after we sold the business, and that was, really challenging, but we still kind of came together and were like, "Yeah, we made the right decision." It was hard. It was hard on our employees.
Yeah, can you talk about I mean, I'm thinking of a couple of clients who we helped usher through a sale, and there's, again, this mixed bag of emotions of excitement, guilt, stress. Can you talk about the employees, the community, when you have the biggest warehouse on the block and everyone within, a couple mile radius knows, uh, yep, that's where everyone works, and 1 degree of separation away. It has such a standing in the community, and now that's changed. How did you navigate that, both internally and then externally from a communication standpoint?
Yeah, that was really hard because I think, the environment has changed over the last couple decades. And, whereas my grandfather was a big proponent, like, we'll never sell. We'll always be, we'll always have our business and be employing all these people. And I think the environment's really changed. Just the fact that technology has changed everybody's business, and you need to either, kind of segregate a lot of your profits to go to technology and growth projects. You've got to be, moving the needle, just constantly growing, and thinking what's next to not only attract employees, but new customers, new markets, new industries. You've got to keep on top of that in a different way. I think the pace of change has been dramatic for all businesses, not just family businesses. And now we have AI, staring everybody in the face, and what do we do about that, and how do we incorporate it and transform our business? So I think my father had to kind of come to grips with the fact that, like, we as a family, might not be able to grow the business further, have to come up with other options if the
Yeah.
main purpose is that this business is going to survive beyond us. And we just had a lot of industry headwinds as far as, you know, just competition from overseas. All our competitors were overseas. We were the only ones manufacturing in the US. And we also had electric vehicle mandates at that point coming at us. And we just, really didn't see a growth future for what we were doing, and needed to be honest with ourselves about, do we want to transform this business into something else, or do we, sell the business now, and eventually maybe we, do something else, another business or another. And that's another thing we see a lot with family businesses, now, which I never thought about as a possibility, but, selling your business and then reinventing yourself, buying another business, buying real estate, whatever it is. A lot of our families that we work with at Legacy Capitals have been really kind of creative and innovative with, kind of reinventing the idea of what is their own family business.
Right. And you mentioned something interesting. You said you ended up selling to the PE firm who you spoke with first. Was the first conversation, was that a bilateral conversation where they approached you and then you went through a competitive process? I think you referred to it as the dog and pony show, and then you ended up with them?
Yeah.
The reason I ask is the size of your business, and you had a fiduciary board. I think that would have been the process no matter what. In that lower middle market space, you can find a lot of times, right? They get weekly solicitations. One PE or one buyer catches them on the right day, and now you have, again, this bilateral agreement, and it's a buyer pool of one, and all the leverage is held by the buyer in that case. And we've seen, I smile because I can think of a couple of examples. It actually ended up being the first conversation they had. It's just that the price tag was very, very different, and the terms were very different at the end because they took the time. They went through an investment banking process. They went through a competitive process. So it can be easy to get caught up in the moment, get attracted to that offer, and go down a path that might not be the right one, versus taking a step back saying, hey, this is great. This might be the right time, but I need to engage an investment banking team to take me through a competitive process. And he ended up with the same buyer, but like I said, I'm willing to bet
Yeah,
that the terms and conditions may have been a little bit different and better for your family than if you had just gone directly with them.
You got it, 100%. Yeah, it's just kind
Yeah.
of the normal negotiation rules,
Yeah.
gotta have some leverage to negotiate.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And what advice do you have for a business owner staring down a potential transaction and navigating, again, the culmination of their life's work and all of the emotions that go into it. If you have a couple of bullets that you share with business owners facing the opportunity, but also the intricacy of the transaction.
We'll take a deep breath and they're going to try to speed up the process and they're going to try to get you all like, excited and it's an emotional roller coaster and it's really important to, slow it down. You're in charge, you run the business, you own the business. They can tell you what their timeline and their process is, but you're in charge. You have the asset that they want. So there is some cadence to obviously, especially when you go into a process with multiple people bidding on it. That's a different story. But after you get the first phone call, just really kind of slowing the emotions down. Talk to some advisors if you don't have a board. Call friends up who are business owners. Make a bunch of phone calls. Have a bunch of meetings with other people who have gone through the process and just, slow it down, get their advice, and just, kind of try to separate the emotions from it. I would say, yeah, it's really important to get a lot of different people's feedback and advice. But definitely for us, we had a really great non-family CEO who had been through a couple of family business transactions before. So he really led the process for us um and he kind of helped us through that emotional roller coaster. Um so, and I would just say have, frequent meetings with your family to talk through the pros and cons. It is challenging sometimes to bring in employees, maybe your management team. When is the right time to bring them into the process?
Well,
When we had a very professional senior executive team that we had since I came into the business. We started hiring some really senior executives to come onto the team, and they're used to this. They're used to going through sale process. They're used to M&A activity, and so it was important to have kind of our little group of people who were, they were really part of the deal team and also running the business. But yeah, I think the emotional part of it is really tough, and as much input as you can get from the outside, it's important.
yeah. And so you lead the successful sale of the business, and now you're working with a great team over at Legacy Capitals. How did you find Legacy Capitals? And we've alluded to it, but maybe if you want to formally uh, tell us what it is that Legacy Capital does, and yeah, we'd love to hear about this new chapter for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I found Legacy Capitals actually being on Richard Orlando's podcast.
There you go.
And I had been working for a small consulting firm and just in a variety of ways, management consulting and leadership development. And I really felt the draw to work with family businesses. And I had my coaching certification and I have a passion for just developing younger leaders and helping families communicate better and go through any type of transition, transition of their business, transition of their wealth, transition of, maybe it's philanthropy, whatever it is, family office. We work with any and all of those family integrated organizations and trying to help families have better communication, keep healthy communication, and have good relationships through the process while developing and the transition plans between generations. So we facilitate family meetings and family retreats, and I was able to be on Richard's podcast, and he was like, "Hey, what are you doing? Would you like to come work with our families?" And now I'm just really happy being able to share my personal experience and with the families that we work with on a regular basis and helping them, communicate better and just, have good relationships while they're also stewarding their businesses and foundations and family offices and their wealth.
Well, you had the benefit of being on the corporate side, but spent a formidable part of your career in the family business. And now you have the benefit of seeing multiple family businesses. I'd love to know, what is it that, looking back at your time with your family business, things that your company did tremendously well that you didn't know at the time, but now you know because you have some other references, and then vice versa, having learned from, other family businesses during the process, what are things that you would take away and wish you knew, maybe 10 years ago?
Yeah. Well, I think we did a great job of, communicating our values and our culture. We had a really strong company culture around family and around our faith. We had, built the business. My grandfather and my dad built the business on, on Christian values, and that was something really important to them to kind of, bring into the business and build our leadership model around servant leadership. And that was really, really a strong core and foundation of, building the business out, building our leadership, and also just kind of doing the brass tacks of, managing inventory and operations, just all of the kind of structural things that, were needed to build a strong business with good margins. So, focusing in on that, I think, when I look around at some of the family businesses we work with, I think really kind of being intentional about developing the next generation and bringing in some coaching and education at an early age. I would say we did that more organically. We didn't really, have a Legacy Capitals or some other consulting firm to kind of help us and advise us on, what are the different pathways, what are the different roles. And I was always kind of like grasping at straws and kind of felt alone in the process of like, how do I, connect to my family and connect to the family business? And that would have been, something that I would have loved to have, more kind of mentoring and education at an early age to, which is how we really help families a lot with, financial education for, teenagers and people in their 20s, and kind of helping them develop their own sense of self and identity, and kind of mapping out, career paths and career plans, and helping the senior generation, helping them clarify, how are you teaching and mentoring your next generation? A lot of entrepreneurs and, patriarchs, matriarchs, whoever's running the business, they're not always the best teachers and trainers of their skill set. They say, "Hey, just watch me and I'll show you how to do it." And then they turn around and look at the rising generation and say, "Hey, why aren't you doing this? You're not doing it well enough. They're not on the right path. They're not ready." And there isn't a real clear intentional transition plan and mentoring plan and coaching plan. So we like to our help clarify that, and it really starts with the leading generation kind of taking a look at themselves, and how are they actually, communicating and transitioning their knowledge to the next generation.
I'm glad you brought up next generation. I think it's interesting, when we talk about succession planning. Succession planning will happen whether, the owner is a willing participant or not. And it doesn't have to be a sale. It could be, well, in your case, it made it through 3 generations. So it's taking the next generation and finding the right time and developing them. How do you know when the next generation's ready? How do you, if there's a gap, how do you help consultant close that gap? And then on the tough side, how do you make the tough call when maybe they're not ready?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a very intentional process, and at the same time, it's not a micromanaged process. Like, it's flexible, and it should be flexible, and, I think you have to have, regular check-ins and regular, just like in a corporate environment, you have performance reviews and you have regular, talent reviews, and and I would say, once you get an advisory board in place, like they can kind of help That's part of their job is overseeing succession. So, that's something that they can help you with. But you can also use consultants and coaches and advisors to help you with that all along the way. I think it's important to evaluate skill sets and kind of do what they do in the corporate environment. Okay, let's evaluate what jobs, are needed and what kind of skills are needed, to eventually take over the business and really map out a career plan. And, there are certain disciplines, like I was not going to be like the best person to be sitting in um finance for 2 straight years, but that was still on my development plan to move me through as a rotation so I could learn. But it's important to be intentional about career plans and career paths, and really kind of looking at all different options. And, it's hard. I say these days, I always say the role of a CEO of a larger company, and really any company, requires like 10 skill sets, and we all have like maybe 5 that we're really good at. And, hiring a good team around a person is really important, and being honest about like where they're not strong, and hiring the right people to kind of plug in the gaps and be their support. It's really important to have the right talent around you as a team in for the next generation. And that team is going to be very different. My dad's leadership team wasn't able to, we probably had one executive from my dad's team that really made it to our non-family CEO's executive team. So you need different roles and different leadership for different times in the business, and it's really important to be honest about that. It's also, in a family business, it's really important to have non-family leadership that is supportive of your succession process. So the transition process, being honest with those non-family leaders and saying, hey, we're a family business. We want our family to lead this business in the future. And really, there's a nuance to someone, tolerating family in a business, or really being like, hey, I'm going to support your family transition, and I'm going to enable your family business to transition to the next generation. So we just happened to decide our transition plan was to sell, and our CEO was supportive of whichever choice we made. He was super supportive of me. He's a mentor to me now these days. He's still a good friend and mentor for me. So it's really important to have the right people, in the right seats for the right time in the business, and being honest about that. Sometimes it is really, we had to make some really hard decisions about transitioning, some legacy talent from, my dad's time being in the business, when it was time for them to leave, or transition into different roles. But it's important to really, work that, and really spend a lot of time on talent review, and, having the right support structures for the family, if the family wants to continue in management.
And what do you think is a minimum amount of time? Every case is different, but if you're looking at the next generation of talent within your family to take over, what do you think is the minimum amount of time you need to spend developing and creating a path for them?
It really depends on the person and what they've done with their career. If they had a successful career outside the business, and they've built all these skills, and they've had leadership roles outside the business, it could be very short, depending on, hey, dad wants to retire, so and so has been working, I don't know, outside the business in a big company for 15 years, whatever it is. I don't know. That's a hard question. I don't have a good answer for it. It really depends on, and I would use advisors and consultants to help you through that process. You can have people kind of, take a look at their skill sets. I mean, when we were evaluating our first non-family CEO, we had, we did this whole process, this big search process with industrial psychologist, executive recruiter, and they evaluated me, they evaluated my brother, and we did all these assessments to see, we had all this input into the process to see, what our next step was. And so just kind of having talent review on a regular basis and saying, okay, well, you know, Kristen still has these things she needs to work on and these things she needs to develop before she would be considered, as a successor to take over the business, or the same with my brother. We had a really open process.
I love that. Yeah, if there's one thing I've taken away, it's intentionality, thoughtfulness, run a process, be flexible, but at least approach it with a level of thoughtfulness that I think sets the stage for a successful outcome. And I mean, just looking back on the conversation, really interesting. Again, your personal career coming into the family business, managing some significant transition quite successfully, and now helping other family businesses do the same. In closing, what didn't we talk about? What do you want to leave everyone with? A little nugget of wisdom, maybe, that maybe we didn't cover yet.
You have to really kind of sit around the table as a family and, make sure that you are working on the business, not just in the business. And that's, it's important to, look at each other, make sure you're still having fun, make sure you're still having, you know, vacations together and building camaraderie. And I call it familyness outside of the business, because when the business like takes over, it becomes really like an onerous process, and it creates, dissonance with the family. And it's really important to find ways to preserve that familyness experience so that, your kids and your grandkids and, everybody still enjoys being together. And I would say at times we didn't do that as well as we should. My brother and I one time looked at each other in the ski line and said, "It'd be really nice not to be talking about business right now."
Yeah,
So,
carving out that space.
yeah. So finding, really talking about your relationships and working, you know, on the business, creating roles and responsibilities, and knowing that everybody, doesn't have to work in the business to be connected to the family, and finding ways to really honor everybody's skills and identities. And it's important to kind of pull apart, family and business sometimes, even though, everybody knows family, when you have a family business, it's just always, tied together and connected, which is, kind of the blessings and burdens of having a family business.
Well said. Well, Kristen, I really appreciate it. This was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. And thank you so much.
Thanks, Derek.
All right.